Well, hello to everybody here. It's Teresa Sanderson, and today we're talking about nurse well-being is a must for magnet accreditation. So, why am I choosing to talk about this today? I think it's important for us to know that, many healthcare organizations, hospitals aspire to achieve magnet accreditation or that designation from the ANCC, and that's an important distinction, right? But one important thing to consider is that it is uniquely and directly tied to nurse well-being. How is that? How does that happen? Well, the thing is, we can't view magnet accreditation and nurse well-being as two separate ideas or two separate things because they are very well connected. When we take efforts to decrease turnover and the associated cost, when we work to improve morale, empower nurses to lead, well-being is involved in all of these things. So well-being is not a luxury. Instead, it becomes a business strategy for healthcare sustainability and ongoing success. Okay, so this is why it's really important. Magnet accreditation really measures this culture that an organization is working to create, a culture where nurses lead at every level. They stay engaged, they're professionally fulfilled. They are respected as partners in care and they commit long term to their organization. So, Magnet, the model is built on transformational leadership, structural empowerment, exemplary professional practice, new knowledge, and empirical outcomes. Okay, so nurse well-being, let's just go back to basics. Nurse well-being, let's talk about why it is a business strategy for healthcare organization success and sustainability. Okay, going back to the numbers, we know that the cost of replacing just one nurse costs between $60,000 and $90,000. We know that it takes 85 to 110 days to replace that nurse. We also know that the nurses who continue to work in that organization while that vacancy is being filled are doing what? They're working short-staffed, so they're assuming more responsibility than they're ordinarily required to have or should normally be required to have. They're working longer. They may be pulling extra shifts. Maybe there's some overtime and other costs associated with that as well. So when we can place nurse well-being into the foundation of an organizational strategy instead of as an afterthought, turnover declines, retention increases, morale improves, our culture becomes better, and staff tend to stay longer. Nurses tend to stay longer. So this is also backed by data. I'm not just talking fluff here. This is backed by data and also by common sense, right? So when hospitals are pouring money into temporary staff or PR to impress magnet reviewers, things like that, and ignoring the well-being of nurses, they're really setting themselves up for failure, okay? And I personally believe that nurse well-being, remember, nurses are the ones in a healthcare organization, a hospital, skilled nursing facility, long-term care facility, rehab facility, who are providing the 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week care for patients, right? So it is necessary that their well-being is protected, okay, on a foundational level, as much as you would protect the brick and mortar structure that your patients walk into, as much as the equipment that you bring into your operating rooms and radiology departments. The same value needs to be placed on nurse well-being, because if your nurses are running on empty, they can't perform at the top of their license. So what does that do? That just creates increased risk of patient harm, potential adverse outcomes, things like that. It also leads to decreased patient satisfaction, lower staff morale, lack of teamwork, and lots of things like that. So there are so many good reasons for supporting nurse well-being and considering it a foundational strategy. But, decreasing nurse retention, that's a piece of the puzzle, but there's so much more to nurse well-being than just, decreasing nurse turnover. We really want to be decreasing nurse turnover, having less attrition, And the bottom line is nurses do not leave the bedside or any role because they can't handle the work. It's the overwhelm, the sense of being unheard and unseen, and being physically, emotionally, and otherwise exhausted that causes nurses to leave. Nurses are excellent clinical practitioners. They know the job, they know the work. What they can't handle is the additional burdens, right? So, some of the things that are known to keep staff committed are, of course, safe staffing levels. When nurses can feel assured that when I walk into my unit, I'm going to have a reasonable assignment and a patient load that I feel that I can comfortably care for, that's an ace in the hole right there. When nurses have access to mental health support and resources without any stigma, that's also a great, great thing for them. When nurses have access to peer mentorship, okay, real support, answers to real questions, and guidance in clinical situations, they're going to flourish. When they have respectful leadership, nurses are also going to enjoy their work environment. They're going to feel safe there, psychologically as well as emotionally and physically. When nurses have opportunities for professional growth, they're also going to feel like, oh my goodness, I'm not just going to be in this role forever. I have opportunities to move into something bigger for myself along the way within my organization. Okay. So these are some of the reasons that nurses stay and want to plant roots where they are. But the bottom line is we also need to take care of our culture within our work environment. So whatever the culture is on your unit, if it is a harsh nurses eat their young kind of culture, we're really going to need to level up on that and get a handle on and transform that culture from one where nurses eat their young to one where nurses feed their young. Because in a survey I did, a little more than a year ago on LinkedIn, 86% of nurses I surveyed, there were almost 700 who voted. 86% of those 700 said they had left a position because of toxic nursing culture. Another 7% said, I haven't yet, but I would if I could. So we can no longer deny the impact of workplace culture on nurse retention. It is a thing. And it goes right along with nurse well-being, because what I find is when I talk with nurses about what it's like to work in a toxic nursing culture, they inherently just start telling me, I'm stressed out. I'm anxious when I have to interact with this person. I always feel, intimidated. I feel threatened. I don't feel like I know what to say. So these kind of environments really make nurses question their own value, question themselves. Do I know enough? Am I good enough? And lead to a lot of the depression and anxiety that we're seeing rising in nurses every day. So how can we shift from this sense of powerlessness and maybe not powerlessness, but overwhelm and intimidation, and empower nurses to show up as leaders? How can we do that? And this is also a part of the magnet process, right? It starts with us recognizing that nurses are innovators, they're educators, problem solvers. I joke a lot that nurses can solve any problem with a straw and a piece of tape, but truly they're used to doing so much with so little. And so the magnet model calls for transformational leadership. And the bottom line, you can't lead if you're barely surviving. And I talk a lot about this as well, that our nursing leader, typically the unit manager role, has really been designed to fail because our unit managers and frontline managers are usually pulled into staffing gaps to work the floor instead of being able to lead their teams and units. Okay, that position is not sustainable. I don't know how anybody can possibly do it when they're always pulled out of their role to work on the floor. There's got to be a better way. We need to set our leaders up for success. Other things that we can do to empower every nurse to lead is to encourage nurse-led innovations and solutions, nurse-led projects. We can develop their advocacy skills and their communication skills so that when a patient needs something, they're comfortable, taking it up the chain, talking to the physician, whoever it is they need to talk to get that accomplished for their patient, and also to advocate for themselves. Because there's something about a nurse who recognizes problems in the workplace. When this nurse is an advocate and has been trained in how to communicate with emotional intelligence and with influence, that nurse can step up, speak up, and articulate well exactly what it is that he or she has found and the potential solutions. And this is exactly what we need. When nurses are empowered to lead, they can also participate in shared governance, and they can help with gaining buy-in from staff for system-wide changes. And this is huge. So clearly, improving nursing culture and improving nurse morale drives better outcomes. It means that we're going to have more engaged nurses, stronger teamwork, we're going to have better clinical outcomes, increased patient safety, and we're going to have greater patient trust and patient satisfaction as well. So all of these are great reasons to lead the process of achieving magnet accreditation with nurse well-being. Because when your nurses are supported, when they are well taken care of, just as the foundation of your building is well taken care of inside and out, your nurses will be able to show up as their best selves and practice at the top of their license. Again, the cost of ignoring nurse well-being, we've seen that. We're in that right now. That's more resignations, a lot more turnover. Fewer experienced nurses. This is one of the biggest problems we have today, is that our experienced and seasoned nurses are backing out of the profession, leaving us with newer, less experienced nurses who have all the heart. Don't get me wrong. They have all the heart, but they don't have seasoned nurses on their units to fall back on for mentorship and peer support. Okay. Other things that happen, of course, decreased patient safety, increased risk for negative outcomes, and risk even to the magnet designation or accreditation process. So here's the thing. Magnet status is earned by organizations that build cultures of integrity, innovation, and inclusion. Okay. You don't get there with burnout, overwhelmed, stressed out nurses. You get there with belief in your people, in your purpose, and in the profession. And so that's why, investing in nurse well-being is a strategy for magnet success. Okay. So how do you get started with something like this? It's very, very simple. Conducting a nurse well-being assessment in your organization is definitely something worth doing. Have your nurses really assess their own well-being and gather some reports and data on how they're doing. Launch mentorship programs and other leadership development programs. Create accessible mental health resources that don't necessarily always require that a nurse talk to their nurse manager, and instead can access mental health support in a more confidential way. Have policies that align with the reality of clinical practice, and partner with other organizations that center on nurse empowerment and culture change, like Nurses Feed Their Young and Thriving Nurse Network. I know that there are many healthcare organizations out there, many hospitals who would like to serve their nurses better. Okay. I know they would really like to take care of and protect nurse well-being, because it does have an effect on bottom line, as well as it's just the right thing to do, right? So if you're in a hospital healthcare organization, you might be thinking, I don't have the bandwidth for this. We don't have the staff to do all these things. We don't have, the time to put into it. How would we ever build that system? That's where Thriving Nurse Network comes in, because that is our platform that is already built. It is already built and staffed with more than 25 nursing leaders and experts who are ready to offer and provide peer support and mentoring to nurses in your organization. We do a lot of other great things in there, including well-being assessments that we track data over time. And we also provide ongoing continuing education and various meetups where nurses can show up as humans first and nurses second, which I believe in the holistic picture of things just makes sense. So what I would love for you to do today is reach out, click the link below this video, get yourself scheduled for a complimentary consultation to learn what it would look like to bring Thriving Nurse Network to your organization and how we might support you in achieving magnet status and or just taking excellent care of your nursing team. We are here to serve, and I hope to hear from you soon. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time. Bye.